The news from ITN with Steve Scott.
Afghanistan under fire, injuries as US bomb goes astray. Israel suspends withdrawal from Palestinian towns. Inside the Kursk, the first pictures revealed. And Aston Villa top of the Premiership for the first time in 3 years. Good evening. US warplanes have pounded targets in Afghanistan in the heaviest attacks yet. The capital, Kabul, as well as Taliban targets on the front line have come under fire. It's also emerged one US missile went astray and struck a village behind anti-Taliban lines. A family of 10 is missing and 20 civilians are believed to have been injured. Andrea Catherwood has the first of this evening's reports.
A US warplane roars through the skies over Afghanistan, dropping bombs on Taliban positions just miles from the Afghan opposition forces of the Northern Alliance. These are the heaviest bombing raids yet. Here, a direct hit on a Taliban position on the front line north of Kabul. The raids come in the wake of a series of upsets for the Allied forces. First, more evidence that bombs have missed their targets. This was a Red Cross warehouse in Kabul. It's the second time the Red Cross has been hit. Workers here say badly needed food and medical aid has been destroyed. Then Pakistan's president, in an interview with an American TV network, suggested Allied forces may be facing a quagmire in Afghanistan.
If the military objectives are such that their attainment is causing difficulty, their identification is causing difficulty, their locations are causing difficulty, then yes, it may be a quagmire.
That comes just a day after the death of this key Afghan figure, Abdul Haq, an important opposition leader with close links to the West. He was travelling to Kabul in secret to try and secure support. Instead, he was betrayed to the Taliban, who hanged him. And in Pakistan, thousands of pro-Taliban supporters like these men are now crossing the border into Afghanistan, say Pakistan's border police. Calling themselves holy warriors, they're going to join the Taliban and fight the Americans. The bombing continues, but tonight, after almost 3 weeks, there is little evidence that it is weakening Taliban forces. Andrea Catherwood, ITN.
ITN's Julian Mannion is in Afghanistan and says after a day of heavy bombardment, one US bomb went astray, hitting the village of Nekho, 2 miles inside Northern Alliance lines.
Well, the bombardment of Kabul was apparently intensive. The bombardment at the front line, closer to where we are, was actually fairly sporadic, just a few bombs. But it appears that one of those bombs went seriously astray in a village called Hanakil, somewhat to the east of us. And what we now understand from a local commander from that area is that at about 4:30 p.m., there was a US airstrike in that area, and it actually hit, it seems, this village, Hanakil, which is about 2 to 3 kilometers on the Northern Alliance side of the front line. In other words, it was a miss, and a very serious miss. It appears that a bomb or missile plowed into a couple of houses in this village and killed 10 people and injured about 20. The 20, we understand, have been taken to a hospital in the Panjshir Valley about an hour away.
Chief correspondent for ITN's Channel 4 News, Alex Thompson, met up with the injured survivors as they headed north to a hospital in the area controlled by the Northern Alliance. His exclusive report contains some images viewers may find distressing.
Going down the road to Kabul to the front line this morning, it was a market day almost like any other. Except for the distant rumble of American jets. They'd been overhead since dawn this morning for at least 6 hours. When we reached the front, Northern Alliance soldiers pointed out the Taliban village Nekho across the valley. Several American bombs had landed there this morning, they said. Such was the sustained nature of the attack, Northern Alliance soldiers here had felt so relaxed they'd gone to the bazaar shopping, only returning to their posts mid-afternoon. But by now the soldiers were talking of civilian casualties from Nekho. Minutes later, slumped in a cart, we found Shakila. In shock, wounded in the leg by the airstrike. Relatives said her son and nephew had been killed by it. Her husband had gone back to look for their bodies. Her 12-year-old daughter next to her with an eye injury. It had taken 2 hours crossing the front lines to get this far, heading for the nearest hospital. But there was more. Coming along behind her, Shakila's son, just 1 year old, with head injuries. With our van, we got them up the road to Kapisa, where the no weapons sign marks a simple first aid post. Even as they went in, it seemed likely all three would need more extensive treatment. Bachagakum, she gasped, meaning her little son left behind in the rubble somewhere. She had indeed received a deep leg wound. With her daughter's headscarf removed, the extent of her eye injury was obvious. Both would need more than they can offer here. As their wounds were cleaned and they were sedated, outside we repeatedly asked eyewitnesses why they were so sure this was an American bombing, not, for instance, a Taliban shelling. They were absolutely certain.
This morning at first, the planes came and bombed the mountains. Later at 11 o'clock, they bombed the village where there's no artillery or Taliban forces.
Inside, Shakila's 1-year-old son, sometimes limp and silent, sometimes screaming with pain, was receiving treatment for head injuries. The people injured here today and their relatives have perhaps more reason on earth than anyone else to hate the Taliban. They've been trapped by the Taliban, and yet they're sure today of two simple facts. Firstly, that there were no Taliban installations or any military installations whatsoever in that village today. And secondly, that the bombardment was American, nothing to do with the Taliban, whom they hate. Unquestionably, the heaviest bombardment in 5 days of attacks here. The effect on the Taliban isn't known this side of the lines, but it's obviously maiming and killing women and children. A fact highlighted by the president of the Northern Alliance, who spoke exclusively to us this morning.
British television.
But we are worried about the civilian casualties among the poor people of Afghanistan. Sometimes this is happening as a result of this bombardment.
Many of his people, even among the Northern Alliance, are worried too. And they wonder how many more families we shall see blown apart by the American bombardment coming up the roads from the front line. Alex Thompson, Channel 4 News, north of Kabul in Afghanistan.
Afghan refugees fleeing into Pakistan have described Kabul as a city nearing breaking point. They've also said that with military facilities so close to residential areas, civilian casualties are inevitable. Our diplomatic correspondent, Lindsay Hilson, is in Peshawar for ITN's Channel 4 News and has been talking to some of the refugees who've left Kabul.
Each one has a story, a tale of fear and suffering. Put them together and you have the story of Kabul. The refugees who've reached Pakistan say Taliban have treated Kabul residents more kindly since the bombing started. But they hate the growing numbers of Arab and Pakistani fighters in their midst. They gather at the UN Refugee Office in Peshawar. Most say they fled because there's no place in Kabul they can be safe from American bombing. From conversations with these refugees, I'm building up a picture of Kabul as a city gradually reaching breaking point. People don't necessarily think the Americans are trying to hit them, the civilians, but they say that Taliban military facilities are so near the residential areas, and Taliban themselves so widely dispersed around Kabul, that if the Americans are really to damage Taliban power, it's inevitable that more and more people's houses are going to be hit. Two men who wanted to remain anonymous told me what they'd observed of Taliban movements in Kabul.
They have established their bases in people's houses, and they are using these houses for their communication system. They have their telephones there.
Taliban used to go to the government offices, but they no longer do that. Now Taliban come to the city in the morning and leave in the afternoon, spending the night somewhere else.
This Pakistani is preparing to fight. Some 5,000 like him went over the border to Afghanistan today. Tribal elders gather gold for jihad. The Afghans I spoke to said many more Arabs and Pakistanis have arrived since the bombing, disguising themselves as Afghans. They're seen as a major cause of Afghanistan's misery.
We see Arabs roaming the streets. If they go into bazaar or to the shops, they wear turbans like Taliban. When they leave the shops and are sitting in their cars, the people see them.
In the afternoon, they usually leave the city in pickups and go to the desert. After spending the night somewhere, they come back to the city in the same pickups.
The refugees told me that Afghans hate all armed foreigners. To them, Arabs, Pakistanis, Americans, British, they're all invaders. They fear a ground war would be even worse than bombing. The Pakistani government won't acknowledge that the refugees exist, so in Peshawar they merge into the crowd. Their stories make uncomfortable listening for Pakistan and for the Americans as the war continues. Lindsay Hilsom, Channel 4 News, Peshawar.
In the latest anthrax alert in America, traces of the bacteria have been found in the offices of 3 congressmen in Washington. This latest discovery follows the closure of the Supreme Court, which was shut after anthrax was found in its postroom. The funeral of the first post worker killed by the disease has taken place. The total number of people now infected stands at 14. Israel has confirmed that it's suspending its withdrawal from 2 Palestinian towns. Israeli radio says senior government sources have told them the pullout is suspended indefinitely because of continuing gunfire. Chris Howes reports.
The confirmation came this evening that Israel had decided to suspend its withdrawal from 2 Palestinian towns. The pullout was suspended indefinitely due to continuing gunfire, according to reports on Israeli radio. Israel insists that there must be complete calm before any withdrawal actually takes place. Earlier in the day, an Israeli tank reportedly fired at Palestinian gunmen in Bethlehem as Israel prepared an initial withdrawal. Israel's Prime Minister Ariel Sharon had been under intense international pressure to pull out of Palestinian-controlled areas. His initial decision to do so followed a meeting with the German Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer. Fischer also met the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. Israel says he must do more to restrain militant groups if its soldiers are to stay out of the West Bank. The sight of Israeli tanks on their streets is becoming an ever more familiar one for Palestinians. This weekend's pullout was meant to be a welcome scaling down in hostilities. Chris Howes, ITN.
The first pictures inside the Russian submarine Kursk have been released. Investigators say the devastation proves nothing could have saved the crew, as the submarine was flooded within 8 hours of the explosion. Bridie Barry reports.
Investigators have described what happened here as the worst hell imaginable. The bulk of the Kursk was raised in a massive salvage operation earlier this month and towed to dry dock near Murmansk. This official video footage, the first pictures of the interior of the doomed Russian nuclear submarine. It shows the compartments where the Kursk's commanders and most of the crew died. Pieces of torn metal and equipment, evidence of the powerful explosions that caused the vessel to sink to the bottom of the Barents Sea in August last year, killing all 118 crew. At the time, the Russian government had come under fire for taking too long to launch a rescue mission. But the country's Prosecutor General, Vladimir Ustinov, says nothing could have saved the crew. The inner hull of the submarine was completely filled with water 8 hours after the explosions. Investigators say that at least 23 sailors who survived the blasts would have died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Their notes, found by divers who recovered 12 bodies a year ago, reveal they began feeling the effects within 90 minutes of the explosions as fire spread through the submarine. 19 bodies have been found inside the wreckage. Investigators say most of them died of suffocation. Their bodies will be taken back to their hometowns, where ceremonies with full military honours will be held. The cause of the disaster is still unknown, though it's thought a torpedo possibly misfired. As investigations continue, an operation to fully disarm the submarine's cruise missiles will begin next week. Bridie Barry, ITN.
Much more to come this evening, including Manchester United saved just seconds from time and going back in time, the final farewell to this year's summer.
Frank key 4 fingers has a diamond the size of a fist.
What do I know about diamonds? I'm a boxing promoter.
Press your back to there, concentrate.
Did you understand a single word of what you just said?
Anything to declare?
Yeah, don't go to England.
You take sugar?
No, thank you, Turkish. I'm sweet enough.
Should I call you Bullet, Tooth?
You can call me Susan if it makes you happy.
A film by Guy Ritchie. Snatch, showing today on the front row.
See you ringside.
The main stories from ITN. America has carried out the most sustained military attack on Afghanistan since the campaign against terrorism began. They have repeatedly bombed the capital, Kabul, and Taliban targets on the front line. The strike comes as Pakistan's president warns the campaign is in danger of getting bogged down. Israel has confirmed that it's suspending its withdrawal from 2 Palestinian towns. Israeli radio says senior government sources have told them the pullout is suspended indefinitely because of continuing gunfire. The first pictures from inside the Russian submarine Kursk have been released. Investigators say that the devastation seen proves that nothing could have been done to save the crew. Ulster Unionist leader David Trimble has won the official backing of his party's executive to return as First Minister of the Northern Ireland Assembly, but he still needs to win a crucial vote next week, and some Unionists remain sceptical about the IRA's commitment to disarmament. Here's our Ireland correspondent Mark Webster.
Protests were confined to the outside as David Trimble silenced his critics within the party and set the scene for his re-election as First Minister as early as next week. Clearly relieved, he emerged with a mandate for the party's future policy.
I would like to have significant support, but we will continue in what we believe are the best interests of the people of all of Northern Ireland in trying to ensure that we bring to Northern Ireland peace and democracy, devolution and decommissioning.
Last night in North Belfast, it was clear how far the province still has to go to find lasting peace. An 18-year-old soldier was seriously wounded by a homemade bomb thrown by loyalists. Today there were further minor clashes on the same street, which is used by Catholic schoolchildren to walk through a Protestant area. What happened here is yet another reminder of the volatility of the situation and the level of sectarian hatred which still exists in certain parts of Belfast. Though the devolved government should be back in place by the end of next week, the much, much greater task is getting communities like this one to live peacefully together. Mark Webster, ITN, Belfast.
Now for a full sports roundup, starting with football, and Aston Villa have moved to the top of the Premiership for the first time in 3 years. John Gregory's side came from behind to beat Bolton 3-2. Arsenal could have gone top, but they drew 1 each at Sunderland. Ian Abrahams reports.
Bolton were shock winners at Manchester United last week and looked to spoil Villa's party at Villa Park. Michael Ricketts put them ahead. John Gregory's side equalised courtesy of one Pablo Angel. Angel was involved in the second goal too, a cute flick for Darius Vassell to make it 2-1. Villa's third came from the penalty spot after that push. Angel from £9.5 million misfit to Villa hero. Ricardo Gardner's run set up Michael Ricketts for a late Bolton consolation, but Villa are top. Arsenal went to Sunderland looking for their first win since 1966 on Wearside. They hadn't scored at Sunderland for 18 years, at least Kanu put that right in the first half. Eventually, the Nigerian was cool, his first start of the season yielding his second goal of the campaign. Arsenal were running rings round Sunderland, but a former Arsenal hero, Stefan Schwartz, equalised his first goal since New Year's Day. Arsenal should have scored a second when Freddie Lundberg was brought down inside the penalty area, but Patrick Vieira's ineptitude from the penalty spot meant it stayed at 1-1. Thierry Henry, the usual taker, wasn't impressed. And Sunderland could have won it through Julio Arca's header in the last minute, but rightly he was adjudged to be offside, and a 1-1 draw went down well with the managers, if not with their respective players. Ian Abrahams, ITN Sport.
So Leeds lost top spot after a 1-1 draw at champions Manchester United. Mark Viduka put them ahead with just 13 minutes left, but Ole Gunnar Solskjaer equalised 90 seconds from time. Coventry are top of Division 1 tonight. The Sky Blues beat Sheffield Wednesday 2-0 at Highfield Road and go above Wolves and Crystal Palace, who both play tomorrow. Scottish Premiership League leaders Celtic beat Kilmarnock 1-0 at Celtic Park thanks to an injury-time goal from Belgium defender Oos Valgeren. The gap with Rangers back in second remains 7 points after Dick Advocate's side beat Livingston 2-0. Michael Carr reports.
Livingston have created quite a stir in the SPL. A 0-0 draw at Ibrox earlier this season showed they would not be overawed amongst the big clubs. Rangers were looking to close the gap on leaders Celtic, and Bert Konterman chanced his arm early on. Shota Avaladze also went close from distance, forcing a good save from Nick Culkin. Rangers' pressure paid off after 23 minutes. Good work from Claudio Canigia saw Claudio Reyna fire home the opening goal. In the second half, Rangers continued to dominate. Captain America Reyna grabbed his second despite the best efforts of Culkin. Torre Andre Flo was then upended in the box. Marvin Andrews got a red card for his efforts, but Flo wasted the penalty with a dreadful spot kick. It wasn't to be the Norwegian's day. He hit the post soon after. But Rangers picked up the points as they try and stay in touch with Celtic. Michael Carr, ITN Sport.
Fantastic light ridden by Frankie Dettori won the Breeders' Cup turf race at Belmont Park. The Godolphin horse, trained by Aidan O'Brien, headed home St Leger winner Milan for a European 1-2. Rugby Union in the Heineken European Cup, holders Leicester narrowly beat Perpignan 31-30 in France to maintain their 100% record. There were also victories for Stade Francais, Swansea, Cardiff and Montferrand. Bath continued to set the pace in Pool 3 after a comfortable 37-6 victory over Edinburgh. Welsh flanker Gavin Thomas scored the final try as John Carlard's side secured their third win of the competition. Now, it only happens once a year, and for most of us, Sunday morning will mean an extra hour in bed. But why do we turn the clocks back? And do Brits support it? Louisa Baldini from ITN's 5 News went to the home of Greenwich Mean Time itself to find out.
Now this is the ultimate place to set your watch. Greenwich, home to precision timekeeping for over 100 years. This is the meridian line where time is always Greenwich Mean Time, and from where all the time zones in the world are calculated from. Now tonight, when you turn your clocks back, they'll be reverting from British summertime to GMT. So at 2 tomorrow morning, the official end to British summertime, you should put your clocks back 1 hour to 1 AM GMT. It means an extra hour in bed, and it won't be so dark when we get up in the morning. Bliss. But apart from that guilt-free luxury, is all this clock changing a waste of time?
I don't like it at all because it throws my system out completely. I'd much rather keep the clocks just as they are.
Well, I think it's a bit of a bore having to get up later and earlier in summer. I'd rather stick to one time.
Do you find it a hassle to have to change your clocks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a hassle.
Yeah.
But
It's a
not much of a
nuisance.
hassle. Not much of a
It's
hassle.
not much of a hassle, no.
I come from North Scotland and it gets dark in the mornings, so the farmers can't work, people can't go to school, so it's very important to change the time there.
Well, there are no plans to scrap the 2-time system for now, so if you do find it all a bit of a hassle, spare a thought for those who have more than just the bedside clock to adjust. Louisa Baldini, 5 News.
The winning numbers in tonight's National Lottery draw are 2, 21, 23, 24, 27 and 38. The bonus ball was 33. The estimated jackpot is £6.5 million. Now a look at the weather prospects. The satellite shows clouds and some rain across parts of Scotland and the West Country. Many central and northern parts are enjoying clear skies. So it should be mostly dry across Scotland tomorrow morning. Some northern parts will be affected by rain though. And a look at northwest England, and it will have a dry and chilly morning after mist and fog patches have cleared. Moving further south, and there'll be a mixture of broken cloud and sunny spells across Ireland, with the best of the sunshine in the south there. Wales and the Midlands can also expect a dry morning after a chilly and foggy start to the day. Cloudy skies should clear over the West Country, with sunny spells developing through the morning. And rain will affect the southeast early in the morning, but this should soon clear with many parts of the region becoming dry.